Well, hello and welcome to Movie Night Tonight, the movie discussion podcast where every single week we watch a new film and discuss it in depth, with each month having a new theme. I am your host, Nathanael Molnár. I am joined by Rob Giachinta. Rob, thanks for being here with me.
No problem.
So we are kicking off our month of survival movies, and we are talking about 2000's Castaway, directed by Robert Zemeckis, starring Tom Hanks. This should be an interesting discussion. This is going to be a full discussion, a full spoiler discussion. We're talking about this movie openly as if you watched it with us. So Rob, why don't you kick us off? What are your first impressions of Castaway, and roughly how many times would you say you've seen the film?
This is my second time watching the movie, and this is when I think of survival movies. This is like the number one movie I think of, just because it's probably one of the best survival movies I've ever seen, and I think it's just what people think of mostly. Just even with the title Castaway, you think of someone on a deserted island, and it's a really great movie. And Tom Hanks is excellent in this movie. It's one of his best performances, I think. And it's a movie that you can't really get sick of, in my opinion. You can watch, whenever. And I think it's a movie that's good for, I'd say, like you could watch for your family, you could watch it by yourself. It's just a really good, solid entertainment.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I'd say, I don't know for sure how many times I've seen this film. I'd probably say 3, 4, maybe 5 times, right in that window. I completely agree with you. I love this movie. This is one of my favorite Tom Hanks movies, one of my favorite Tom Hanks performances. He's just fantastic in this. One of my favorite Robert Zemeckis movies. I think he just does a phenomenal job directing this film. And I would agree with you, and we'll get a little bit more into survival movies in general a little bit later in the discussion. But I would completely agree with you that Castaway is one of the most definitive survival movies. Like, when you're thinking about pure, simple survival, Castaway is just that. I don't think it really gets much simpler than a person who's marooned on an island that they have to fight to survive. That's at the core of the genre. So I completely agree with you there. I just think this is a wonderful movie, very well written, very well shot, beautiful performances. Overall, it really packs a punch. And I think this is a very, very good movie. So this is kicking off our month of survival movies. And as we like to do here, with the beginning of each month, we kind of like to define a little bit, what are we looking at the top of the month? What are we looking at with the films that we are going to be watching and discussing? What kind of qualities are we expecting? What are we expecting to take away from these films? And then as the month goes on, we kind of see how our initial impressions of the genre kind of fall into place, whether we're right, whether we're wrong, or there are some things that we weren't expecting that we actually did take away from the genre. And so I want to throw it over to you, Rob. When you look at survival movies, when you look at this genre of films, what do you immediately expect from survival movies?
Usually, I would expect it to be like a singular person, usually, and them to be in a situation where, they're kind of pushed their limits and have to kind of rely on their own personal skills and what they can do best in order to survive and get out of a difficult situation.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a very good point you were saying off the top, especially, was that usually it's one person, because that's one of the key things about survival movies is that element of isolation, that a person no longer is able to rely, as you said, on other people. They have to only rely on who they are and what they have. And that's part of the exciting part of survival movies, I think at least, is that question of, will this person survive or won't they? Will they be able to make ends meet? Will they be able to rise to the occasion and actually survive? I think one of the things that's really interesting about survival movies is, and especially with Castaway, you see this a lot. Some of the movies we'll look at this month don't necessarily fall into this, and we'll kind of be able to talk about with those movies, what are those differences. But for Castaway especially, you look at this idea that people have evolved to a certain point where there is this sort of dependency on machines, on technology, on all these things that we come to expect are part of our daily lives. I think if you look at what's going on with coronavirus right now, you especially see that there are a lot of people who realize how sort of hopeless they are once those things that they immediately depend upon are taken away from them. Now put yourself in a position where it's far, far, far more dire than having to stay in your house for a couple of months, where you're marooned on an island. It kind of puts somebody in the position of, now I have to go back to sort of our ancestral roots as a species. This is where we began. We began trying to make fire. We began having to hunt and gather. And we kind of began at this point, and we've evolved from it to be in this sort of lap of luxury that we live in the world. And now that person is being thrown back into our origins. And so with this movie in particular, the question is, can this person adapt or revert back to how we were able to survive originally? Or will the fact that we have evolved so much, that we have become so dependent upon technology, upon all these other facets of our existence in the modern world, will that dependency be our downfall? And in Castaway, we see he is able to adapt. And I think that's part of what they do so well in the setup of this movie. Is they really set up Tom Hanks's character of Chuck Noland to be this person of, he's very much a modern man. You know, he's ingrained in everything that's going on. He's very much, to use the terminology of another movie, he is hooked into the Matrix. He's very much involved in the world and relies on what the world has to offer. And so once he is kind of ripped away from that and thrown onto this island, now all of a sudden he has to completely change as a person. And I think that change is heightened even more once we see him after he's escaped the island and how different of a person he is returning to the modern world. How different he is from when he was there originally. A little bit about the making of this film. So originally, they shot the very beginning of the movie where you have Tom Hanks before he's cast away. And then you have the very beginning before we have the 4-year jump. So Robert Zemeckis and their team and Tom Hanks, they filmed this part of the movie, and then they took a year off for Tom Hanks to lose about 50 pounds and grow out his hair. And then they returned and resumed filmmaking, and they finished the film at that point. A couple of things I thought was interesting. One, in the year-long period between the filming of this movie, Zemeckis went ahead and took the exact same crew that they were using for Castaway and just made another movie. He shot What Lies Beneath, which also came out in 2000, which is a film that I haven't seen, but I've heard good things about it. It's interesting to me that just in this period of time, he just takes this entire crew of people and they just make another movie. Why not? You got the downtime, you might as well just make another movie. So you have that going on. The other part I thought that was interesting about this was when you look at Tom Hanks after the 4 years, it looks like he lost a lot more than 50 pounds.
Yeah.
And so to see, I was like, really? It was only 50 pounds? I'm sure there was probably some makeup. Maybe they did some light visual effects. I don't know. But that's also dedication on an actor's part. Because, I mean, this is 2000. I mean, 4 years later, you would have The Machinist come out with Christian Bale, who got down to, what was it? I think he was 110 pounds when he shot that movie. So you've seen, especially from Christian Bale, you've seen a lot of like dramatic weight loss. But I just think in general, like putting aside the more dramatic examples of it, where you're going down to 110 pounds or going up to however much he weighed for Vice, like putting aside those sort of extremes, just an actor having to gain a lot of weight or lose a lot of weight for a role, I just think like shows a lot of dedication on the actor's part. And I mean, you could say, oh, well, they're getting paid to do this. It's part of their job and they're getting paid a lot of money. Like if I was getting paid like, oh, I don't know, $20 million to lose 50 pounds. Yeah, I could lose 50 pounds. So, that's part of my appreciation for actors is that they really go all in for roles. They will change everything. And that is just hearing this about Tom Hanks. I mean, you see it on screen, but hearing about Tom Hanks and hearing about other actors, it just furthers my appreciation for them.
Remember, whenever you want to get an Oscar nomination, just lose 50 pounds or gain like 200 pounds. And then
Yep.
You're all set.
There you go.
Yeah. That's another thing that I really love about this movie. Just everything seems like real. I know obviously they're special effects when they're making this movie, but everything looks to the most part pretty damn realistic. And for them to do that, especially in 2000, we were just, me and you were just making fun of the Phantom Menace, which came out a year before that. And like practically nothing from that movie holds up. And to think a movie that's this 20 years old now, it pretty much looks seamless. You got to give it up to them.
Yeah, I completely agree. The visual effects in this film are fantastic. And I think you're exactly right. Like that's an apt comparison when you have something like The Phantom Menace or the other Star Wars prequels where...
Yeah, that came after. Yeah.
Where
like the one we were watching Sunday, that was even after Castaway.
Yeah, that was... Yeah, and Attack of the Clones...
2002? 2002.
Yeah. But the thing with those movies, I think, they shot those movies like pretty much entirely in front of green screen. Mm-hmm. And so the whole thing is CGI. The whole thing is visual effects. Whereas with something like Castaway, they use visual effects in a very deliberate and smart way to enhance what they already have. And I think this more applies to older films. Because I think something like Lion King or Jungle Book kind of shows that this isn't necessarily the same issue anymore. But I think when you have movies where their entire thing relies on visual effects, it tends to age far more quickly because visual effects are constantly changing and evolving. And that's why Attack of the Clones, while the visual effects when it came out in 2002 might have been really good, in 2020, they don't really look that good because, I mean,
horrible.
If you take
Especially on like a HD TV, Jesus Christ.
I mean, take Attack of the Clones and, like, I mean, I guess you could even keep it within Star Wars. Look at Rise of Skywalker.
Look at the originals.
Yeah.
The originals look a hell of a lot better than the prequels.
And
because they did what they did everything that they could shoot, with practical effects. They did everything they could, and things that they couldn't, they did with the computer.
Exactly.
The prequels, they just said, we're going to do everything with the computer, and that's not the right way to do it.
Exactly. You're exactly right.
And it's hard, and I can only imagine what those actors had to go through just frigging acting against, like, tennis balls for, like, the entire movie, pretty much.
Well, Tom Hanks acted against a volleyball, so bring it on back. But, no, you're exactly right, because, like, take Castaway. When you're using visual effects to enhance what you already have, to build upon a foundation that you already have, as opposed to creating the foundation with visual effects, that's how Castaway can hold up all these years later, where I'm sitting there and I was watching and I was looking for the point where the visual effects would look bad. Where's that one shot that just does not hold up? And I think someone could make an argument for the whale scene, that the whale part doesn't look the greatest, but even then,
shouldn't even have been in the movie though.
Even then, the visual effects still look really good for that.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there actively looking for CGI that looks bad, and I can't really find it. Whereas Attack of the Clones is just an assault on the eyes in terms of...
it really was painful to watch.
Yeah. So, but I think you're exactly right. When you're taking when you're using CGI to enhance what you already have, when you film as much as you can practically, because if George Lucas directed Castaway, they would not have filmed on an actual island. It would have been all blue screen. Also going with Castaway, something I did not remember from the previous times I'd watched the film, but really came to recognize and appreciate this time was the cinematography. This is an incredibly well shot movie. And I don't really ever hear people talking about this movie in regards to its cinematography. If you look at just the very beginning of the movie, the first handful of shots, I believe the first shot is like an establishing shot. And then the next shot, you have this very intricate crane shot that goes from the postal truck into the garage. And then it switches to a POV shot of the package leaving the table and going into the truck and then going into Moscow. I'm sitting there like watching, thinking just how intricate all this is and how meticulous it must have been to be able to get all of these different shots. It just really shows. I always appreciate when movies don't need to have like really well thought out, really a deep level of appreciation for its cinematography. Because Castaway is a movie. You could have just done regular shots. Like, you didn't need to do all these sort of intricate things. You didn't really need to do all this beautiful framing that they do. You really could have just shot it in a far more basic way, and it would have been fine. And it would have worked. It would have been serviceable. And I think you see that in a lot of movies today, I think, where the movie, it's just like there's nothing really truly dynamic about the cinematography. It's just, let's just capture what's going on. But taking the time to actually put a lot of thought and care into the cinematography just shows that they're putting a lot of thought and care into the film itself and into the experience of the audience watching this movie. And so I was just watching some of these shots and going, this is just beautiful.
I feel like with cinematography, at least like me as a film fan, maybe some others, sometimes I don't think we appreciate like other cinematographers besides like the big name like Roger Deakins or some of those other guys. But like there's a lot of people that do great cinematography, and then their work can be overshadowed sometimes. And yeah, with this one, I think you're right on the money with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think for a lot of film fans, we keep an eye out more for cinematography, and I think maybe just because we as film fans kind of understand a little bit more what it is, we have a deeper appreciation for it. And cinematography is one of those things that like an average person who doesn't really know that much about movies, only goes and sees like maybe 1 or 2 movies a year, they don't necessarily have a same level of appreciation for cinematography, but it's something that they kind of unconsciously know, but they can't really externalize, where they appreciate it when they see it, but they don't really know exactly what they're appreciating or what they're seeing. I just think in general, we need to be more vocal about what cinematography is and our appreciation for it so that other people can feel the same way. But yeah, I agree. The cinematography in this film is beautiful.
I was looking up some of the guy's name is Don Burgess. Yeah, he's done he did the original Spider-Man, bunch of movies. Yeah. Forrest Gump. Oh, he did What Lies Beneath, like you said.
Yep, there you go. There you go.
You know Clark Gregg wrote the screenplay for that?
Yes, I did.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So going back to a little bit about the making of the film, one of the interesting things, I didn't realize this until I was looking it up, was for the sound design, when they were shooting on the island, because of the noise of the waves from the sea, that they're on location, they have all these noises going on, pretty much all of the sounds that you hear on the island, including the dialogue, had to be re-recorded in post-production. They had to re-record all of it. And for most of this movie to take place on this island, and for them to have to record every single sound, including all of Tom Hanks' dialogue, especially for these really emotional moments that Tom Hanks has to like get back into this mindset of his performance that he's giving on this island, to have that same emotional weight. I mean, ADR is a really kind of challenging thing to do. It's ironically, like, just this week, like, I've been doing ADR for my short film, and so I'm kind of in this part of my short film itself, and so have working on the sound design for this film, and working on the ADR, I can see having to re-record everything for this movie. I can't even imagine how like much of a pain in the ass that must have been, and for it to work so seamlessly. I mean, they were nominated. This movie was nominated for Best Lead Actor for Tom Hanks, but it was nominated for Best Sound. I hope that this is why they were nominated, because of the amount of work that they had to do in post to kind of seamlessly make this film work.
Yeah, the sound and the score for this movie were all top notch.
Alan Silvestri did the score for this film.
Yeah, he doesn't get enough credit, I feel like, too. I mean, he's created some of the best, original scores. Like, I feel like no one like talks about the Back to the Future score. Like, that's one of my favorite scores of all time, and I don't know. I just feel like people don't mention it with like Jurassic Park or anything like John Williams has ever done.
Yeah. Alan Silvestri is definitely a fantastic composer. But and with this movie in particular, one of the things that they did really an interesting job with is that for the whole movie, this movie, Castaway, is 143 minutes long, and Alan Silvestri wrote 24 minutes worth of score, because they did not, other than sort of like the Russian chorus that plays at the very beginning of the movie when they're in Moscow, there is no score up until he leaves the island.
Oh, wow. I didn't even realize that, to be honest with you.
It was something where when I was watching the film and he's on the boat, like the raft that he's created, and he shoots out into the water, and then you just hear this swelling of the score. And I was just sitting there thinking, wait, has there been music in this? Because I feel like I don't remember there being music. This sounds new.
Have you ever watched a movie where like it took you to like the end to realize there was like no score throughout the entire movie?
I can't remember specifics, but I do believe that's happened to me before.
That movie I just watched, Dragged Across Concrete.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure like there was no score in that entire movie, because like the movie's like 2.5 hours, and like I was at the 2-hour point, and I was like, I don't remember ever hearing a score for this movie at all.
Yeah. And yeah, that's one of the things that I love about scores, that you can use them in such like subliminal ways to really kind of enhance, because the power that score has in Castaway, when he's on the raft and he breaks through the current and he's out in the ocean, and then you just hear the score come in with, there's so much power and force to that, and that only has that level of power and force if you don't have any of the music leading up to it. It's music can be really powerful. We were just talking about like cinematography being something that's sort of like unconsciously recognized by people. Score does the exact same thing. So yeah, this movie has a brilliant score. It's kind of funny that you bring in Alan Silvestri to do 24 minutes of a score, but damn it, Alan Silvestri's gonna make that the best 24 minutes he can possibly make. So we touched a little bit on Tom Hanks, but I wanted to go a little bit more into Tom Hanks's performance. This has to be one of my favorite Tom Hanks performances. We discussed a little bit earlier, a couple of weeks ago, Philadelphia, the film that Tom Hanks won his first Oscar for, which I thought he was really good in but Castaway for me might be my definitive favorite Tom Hanks performance.
Either this or Captain Phillips to me. Those are probably my two favorites.
Yeah.
He's really good in Forrest Gump too, in that movie. But that movie's kind of just like fluff to me. I know you've never seen it, right?
Yeah, I have not seen Forrest Gump.
I think you should watch it though at some point.
I will at some point. But yeah, I mean I love Tom Hanks's performance in Captain Phillips. He's great in that. He has a bunch of other great performances. Tom Hanks is just one of my favorite actors.
Big too is one of my favorites.
I love him in Big.
Yep.
Tom Hanks, I mean, he's one of those actors where he does such great like pure drama, but then he also does such great just pure comedy. Like he can really do both with such excellence. I think like Robin Williams is another one of those actors that really can do both so well.
He's one of those actors you never see play like a villainous type either.
I would love to see Tom Hanks play a
You should
full-on
watch.
villain.
Oh, another one that's really good is Road to Perdition. He's kind of like an anti-hero in that
Hmm.
movie. That's a really good movie. You should check that out sometime.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
I
Uh,
think it's on Netflix.
hmm. Yeah, I've seen it on one of the streaming services. I remember seeing the title. I mean, Tom Hanks is just so good, and so he was nominated for Castaway. And what's interesting is that up until he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Tom Hanks had not been nominated for a single Oscar since Castaway. Even Captain Phillips, which you said, and I know a lot of people hold that to be one of their favorite Tom Hanks performances. He was not nominated for that. He was not nominated for a lot of movies that he's done in that period of time.
It seems like a lot of like these older actors, like they had their kind of heyday, like back when they were younger, and they got a ton of nominations, and then it took a long time for them to get another. Like I know Al Pacino was nominated this year, and he hadn't been nominated since the '90s.
Yeah.
And Robert De Niro, before he was nominated for Silver Linings Playbook, he hadn't been nominated since the '90s. And I mean, I know Joe Pesci hadn't worked in forever, but he hadn't been nominated since Goodfellas, and it kind of happens that way. And then eventually, I think they find their way back.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think part of it is that a lot of like the juicier roles that the Academy kind of goes for are often given to those younger actors. And once you kind of I mean, Hollywood.
Once you get older, there's only certain kind of roles you can play, like
Exactly.
the grandpa.
Yeah. Once you get over like the 40s and you're into your
Yeah.
50s and so on, I mean, one, like you said, the type of role that you're cast in changes. But I mean, how often do we get like a really true, like in the same kind of way that you would get a film that's structured around a performance like Castaway is, or like Taxi Driver, or like any of these where the movies kind of lend themselves for these really strong performances. How many of those are given to actors over 50? I mean, we don't really have that as much.
I can only think of the Robert Redford movie, All Is Lost.
Yeah.
The only one I can really think of.
Yeah. So actors often they kind of have to change what kinds of roles that they play. And then that was what was interesting about The Irishman when that came along, was that now you have these actors going back to kind of what they had been playing in their youth, playing those kinds of roles again. But yeah, Tom Hanks is really good in this movie. One of my favorite performances of his. So as you know, and those of you listening might not know, in the trailer for Castaway, they actually revealed that Chuck Nolan gets off of the island and reunites with Kelly, which to me, that's kind of mind-boggling to me that they would reveal that.
See, I don't think they would be able to get away with something like that like now, because back in that day, no one really had like the internet. Like you weren't watching trailers on YouTube. You would only see it like if you saw like a TV spot or if you went to the movies and saw a trailer. So I'm sure there wasn't as much as an outrage as there would be. Like say like the new Avengers trailer came out for Infinity War and we saw that Spider-Man and Black Panther and all of them died or whatever. Like that would have been like a big thing, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like they couldn't have got away. So, but I don't even understand why they would have did it in the first place.
Yeah, I don't know what purpose it serves. Because then you just kind of, you alleviate the entire suspense of the film.
Yeah. Like it wasn't like a situation like the movie Room where she gets kidnapped and then she escapes. Like she escapes within like the first 25 to 30 minutes of the movie. And it's the whole movie's about kind of her like getting reclaimed to society. This movie's about him trying to get off the island, and will he or won't he?
Yeah.
So
that's the entire like dramatic struggle of the whole film.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. And
I see why directors want to have control over the trailers that come out, like David Fincher and others.
Yeah. I think so. I get really tired of like trailers revealing so much about a film. And I don't know if it's this way for you or not, but I find when I'm sitting in a movie theater and I've seen, and we're movie fans, and especially as you were mentioning with trailers being on YouTube and everything, we see all the trailers to come out for a movie.
By the time we actually go to the movies to see the movie, we've probably seen the trailer for that movie at least 10 times,
Yeah.
if you think about it.
Literally. And so there are so many points where I'm watching a movie and I know the trailer. And so I'm seeing the bits that are in the trailer pop up in the movie. I'm like, and as I'm watching, I know what parts of the trailer have we not seen yet. And so in my head, I'm trying to deduce, okay, so I saw that shot of this person doing this.
Yep.
That must mean that something like this happens, and then this must happen, and then this must go to here. I can't control it. That's just how my brain is working. I'm kind of deducing the movie as it's unfolding based upon what I've seen in the trailer. That's why I think there should just be a flat-out rule. I don't know who would necessarily enforce this.
I don't know, maybe the studios that hire the
maybe
trailer company.
United Nations can enforce this. But there should be a universal rule that in movie trailers, you cannot show any footage from the third act. I would even go as far as maybe you could only show footage from the first half of the movie.
I agree.
But I think third act should be completely off limits because when you...
Especially for these superhero movies, I don't want to see anything from the final battle, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because obviously we know what's going to happen, but I don't want to see anything from it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And there are a lot of... trailers where they show things but they don't give context, and so it works. Like you're not watching, like you watch the trailer, you're not necessarily figuring out the whole movie, but like I said, when I'm sitting there in the theater, I've seen this trailer like at least 10 times, so I know all the moments, I know all the bits, I know all of the shots, and I'm looking for it as the movie is unfolding. And so that's why I think show nothing from the third act. But, especially with Castaway, to give up the fact that he gets off of the island, I can imagine it would, if I sat in the theater and I saw that trailer, I would say to myself, well, I don't need to go see this movie. Yeah. I've seen it. I know what happens. What's the purpose in seeing it?
Hurting themselves by putting out that trailer.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what they were thinking. That's just ridiculous to me. But we find less and less that studios are doing this. I mean, it still happens. So going into our final thoughts on Castaway, Rob, what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, this is, when we talk about survival movies, this is probably one of my favorites, if not the favorite. It would definitely be a top 3, and it's the one I think about the most when we say the word survival movies, because of Tom Hanks' just absolutely great performance and his willingness to be able to figure out how to get off this island. And it's a movie you could watch, really at any time, any place. And I think I would give it a 4.3 out of 5.
Nice. So my final thoughts are pretty much the same. I love this movie. This is one of those, like you mentioned it before, I have no issue rewatching this movie. I'll just rewatch it all the time. It's a fantastic film.
There's no parts of it where you're bored.
Yeah. No, and it's a 2.5 hour movie. Yeah. I mean, for a 2.5 hour movie to not really have any points where you're bored or where you're looking at the clock or anything like that, that's a testament to them. So good on them for that. I love this movie. Tom Hanks is just fantastic. I love seeing these movies where it's really one actor gets to shine. They have their moment to really kind of show what they're made of, and when they have the screen just to themselves, like Locke or like Buried or any of those kinds of movies where it's really a spotlight on one actor, they really get to shine. And in this movie, you get to really see what Tom Hanks can do as a performer. He's fantastic in this. I think the cinematography, as we were talking about, was great. The special effects, the visual effects, the CGI is all really good. The use of the score is all really good. And something I didn't get to mention during our discussion, but something I really kind of appreciated when I was looking at the film was sort of this setup of Chuck Nolan as a character, where when he is in when he's working his FedEx job, when he's an employee there, he has all these resources available to him, everything that he needs. But the one thing, and they stress this a lot, the one thing that he doesn't have is time. He's constantly wanting more time, needing more time. He has everything that he could need in terms of support and resources. He just does not have time. But then once he's marooned on the island, he has all the time in the world, but he doesn't have the resources. And so that was just like an interesting little flip that they did. That was a nice contrast I really appreciated. And it's just a little thing about his character, and just like kind of linking the two parts of the film, when he was on the mainland and once he's on the deserted island, that I just found really cool that they did. Overall, I just love this movie, and I'd also give it a 4.3 out of 5. So that has been our discussion of 2000's Cast Away. And next week we will be continuing our look at survival movies, with the next film that we will be discussing is The Grey, starring Liam Neeson.
Never seen it.
You haven't seen that movie?
No.
Oh, that's going to be... I don't know why I thought you did. That is a...
Well, I haven't.
Well, that is a... Well, you know what? I was going to say what I think of the movie. I am not going to say what I think of the movie.
I'm gonna assume you liked it if you already seen it and put it on the thing.
We'll find out. We'll find out next week. So, thank you so much for listening. Once again, I'm Nathanael Molnár. Thank you to Rob Giachinta for being here. Thank you, Rob, for joining me. Make sure to like, make sure to comment, make sure to subscribe to Movie Night Tonight's YouTube channel, where all the past 3 seasons are up there, as well as new episodes drop there. Follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram at Movie Night TNT, and you can also listen to the Movie Night Tonight podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So until our discussion next week of The Grey, thank you for listening.